There's something deeply confusing about missing someone who is no longer part of your life. You wake up, you go through your day, you handle your responsibilities, and on the surface, everything seems normal. But in the quiet moments, when the noise fades and you're left alone with your thoughts, she's still there. Not physically, not in your messages, not in your daily routine, but in your mind. She never really left. You thought it would be simple. When the conversation stopped, the feelings would slowly fade. When the connection ended, your thoughts would follow. That's what logic told you. That's what you expected. A clean break. A clear ending. But that's not what happened. Instead, it feels like something invisible is still tied to you. Like a quiet presence that lingers in the background of your life. You could be doing something completely ordinary, driving, sitting alone, or just staring at nothing, and suddenly, your mind drifts back to her without warning. And the strange part is, it's not always the big moments you remember. It's the small ones. The way she laughed. The pauses in her voice. The feeling of being understood without needing to explain yourself. So now you sit there, asking yourself a question that doesn't seem to have a clear answer. If she's truly gone, why does she still feel so close? What you're feeling right now isn't random, and it's not something you can simply switch off. It's more like an invisible thread, so thin you can't see it, yet strong enough to pull your thoughts back to her when you least expect it. On the outside, your life continues as usual. You go to work, talk to people, handle your daily tasks. Nothing looks broken. Nothing seems out of place. But internally, there's a quiet shift you can't ignore. Because every time life slows down, your mind goes back to her. It happens in the smallest, most ordinary moments. When you're waiting for something. When you're alone in your room. When there's nothing demanding your attention. That's when the thread gently pulls, and suddenly, you're not fully in the present anymore. You're somewhere in between, half here, half in a memory. And it's not loud or overwhelming. It's subtle, almost calm, like a quiet hum in the background that never fully disappears. It doesn't demand attention, but it's always there, shaping how you feel without you even realizing it. This is why it's so confusing. Because you're not actively choosing to think about her, but you're also not able to stop. It can make your days feel slightly heavier, like something is missing that you can't quite name. Even simple decisions start to feel different, as if a part of you is still waiting to hear her thoughts, her opinions, her presence. But here's the truth most people don't realize. That invisible thread isn't a weakness. It's a sign that something real left a mark on you. What makes this even more powerful is not just that you remember her, it's how you remember her. Your mind doesn't replay the relationship like a full story with a clear beginning and end. Instead, it loops specific moments, small, almost insignificant scenes that somehow carry the strongest emotional weight. It's rarely the big events. Not the obvious milestones or the things you thought would matter most. It's the quiet details. The way she paused before answering something personal. The tone of her voice when she felt comfortable around you. The subtle shift in her expression when she was deciding whether to open up or hold back. These are the moments your mind keeps returning to over and over again. And the reason is simple. Those moments felt real. Your brain is designed to hold on to experiences that carried emotional meaning, not just logical importance. It doesn't care about what should matter. It holds on to what felt different, what stood out on a deeper level. So even when you try to focus on something else, your mind quietly pulls you back into those fragments. Like a movie stuck on repeat, playing the same scene without ever reaching a final ending. That's why it feels like you can't move on in a clean, logical way. Because your mind isn't done processing what those moments meant to you. And until it understands them, it keeps replaying them. This is where the real tension begins. Because while your mind keeps replaying those moments, another part of you is trying to shut it all down. Your logical side steps in and says, it's over. Move on. There's nothing left to figure out. It tries to remind you of the reasons things didn't work. It points out the flaws, the distance, the ending that already happened. And on paper, it makes perfect sense. But then there's the other side of you, the quieter, deeper part that doesn't operate on logic. That part doesn't care about timelines or explanations. It doesn't respond to reasoning or lists of why things ended. It just feels, and it keeps holding on to something it believes isn't fully finished. So now you're stuck between two systems. One is trying to close the door. The other refuses to believe it's actually closed. And this creates a kind of inner conflict that's hard to explain to anyone else. Because from the outside, it looks like you should be fine. You know it's over. You understand it logically. But inside, it still feels open. That's why this experience can feel so frustrating. Not because you don't understand what happened, but because a part of you refuses to let it end the way your mind says it should. At this point, most people make a small but critical mistake. They keep looking outward. They analyze what she said, what she did, what went wrong, and how things could have been different. They replay conversations, search for hidden meanings, and try to find one clear moment that explains everything. But the more they look there, the more confused they become. Because the answer they're searching for isn't actually in her actions. It's in their reaction. What you're experiencing right now isn't really about her anymore. Not in the way you think. Yes, she was part of the story. Yes, the connection was real. But what stayed behind, what continues to live in your mind, is something much deeper. It's something that was created inside you. And until you shift your focus from her to yourself, none of it will fully make sense. Because the real story was never just about what happened between you two. It's about what that connection awakened within you and why it still hasn't settled. The first truth you need to understand is something called emotional anchoring. This is where everything really begins. Emotional anchoring happens when a person becomes linked to a specific feeling inside you, so deeply that your mind starts to associate them with that emotional state. And the powerful part is, it doesn't happen during big, dramatic moments. It happens quietly, in the small, almost invisible interactions that most people overlook. It happens when she felt comfortable enough to relax around you, when her voice softened without her even noticing, when she shared something personal and trusted you enough to hold it, when there was no pressure, no performance, just a natural, calm connection. In those moments, your brain wasn't just observing, it was recording. It was tagging her presence with a specific feeling: safety, understanding, calm, significance. And once that association is created, it doesn't just disappear when the person leaves. That's why you still feel her presence, even when she's no longer part of your life. Because your mind isn't holding on to her randomly, it's holding on to the state you experienced when you were with her. Most people think they miss the person, but in reality, they miss how that person made them feel about themselves. With her, you may have felt more grounded, more confident, more understood without needing to explain everything. You didn't have to force anything, it just flowed. And your brain recognized that as something important. So now, whenever life feels a little off, a little empty, or a little uncertain, your mind goes back to the last place it felt that kind of emotional clarity. It goes back to her, not because she was perfect, but because she became the anchor for a feeling you haven't fully replaced yet. And until you understand that, it will keep pulling you back again and again. The second truth is something most people misunderstand completely. It's the natural push and pull dynamic between two people. This wasn't a game. It wasn't manipulation. It wasn't something she was doing on purpose to keep you hooked. It was simply her being in her natural rhythm and your mind responding to it in a very human way. There were moments when she felt close, open, and fully present with you. In those moments, the connection felt effortless. You didn't have to question anything. You felt that sense of ease, like everything was exactly where it should be. And then, there were moments when she pulled back. Not in a dramatic way, not with conflict or clear explanations. Just a subtle shift, a little more distance, a little more independence, a slight change in energy that you couldn't fully explain, but you could definitely feel. That shift created tension. Not negative tension, but emotional tension, the kind that makes you lean in a little more, think a little deeper, and feel a stronger desire to reconnect. And without realizing it, your mind started adapting to that rhythm. When she was close, you felt complete. When she pulled away, you felt the urge to close the gap. Over time, this created a cycle, a pattern your brain got used to, a pattern where connection and distance existed side by side, each one making the other feel more intense. And that's exactly why the feeling stayed with you. Because your mind never experienced a steady, predictable ending. It experienced a rhythm that kept shifting, never fully settling into a clear conclusion. So now, even after everything has ended, your brain is still following that same pattern. Still expecting another moment of closeness. Still waiting for the next shift. Not because you're weak, but because your mind adapted to a connection that was never completely still. The third truth goes even deeper, and it explains why it feels so hard to let go, even when you know you should. Your mind struggles with things that feel incomplete. It's naturally designed to seek closure, resolution, and clear endings. When something starts, your brain expects it to finish. When a story begins, it wants a final chapter that makes everything make sense. But emotional connections don't always work that way. Sometimes they end quietly, not with a clear conversation, not with a strong final moment, but with small pieces left behind, things unsaid, questions unanswered, emotions that were never fully expressed. And those are the things your mind holds onto the most. Maybe it was a moment where she almost said something important, but didn't. Maybe it was a feeling that was growing, but never fully explored. Maybe it was a connection that felt like it had more potential, but stopped halfway. These are what we call unfinished emotional loops. And your brain doesn't like leaving loops open. So it keeps going back, replaying different versions of what could have happened, trying to fill in the missing pieces, trying to create an ending that was never clearly given. That's why it feels like she's still in your mind. Because in a way, the story never fully ended inside you. It paused. And now your brain keeps returning to that same point, hoping to finally resolve it. But here's the important part. This doesn't mean there's something more you need to do with her. It means there's something your mind is still trying to understand. Until that understanding comes, the loop stays active. Not because you're holding on, but because your mind hasn't found the final meaning yet. The fourth truth is perhaps the most profound. She was a mirror for you. Most men believe the key to moving on or understanding a connection is figuring out her intentions, her feelings, her choices. But the real lesson is not about her at all. It's about what she reflected back to you. When you were with her, you saw parts of yourself that had been dormant or forgotten. You felt strengths, emotions, and qualities that you hadn't fully acknowledged before. Maybe you felt more capable, more confident, more alive, more understanding, or more emotionally available. She didn't give you these traits. They were already inside you, but her presence awakened them. She acted as a mirror, showing you what you could be when you were fully aligned with your own potential. And once that mirror was shown to you, your mind naturally wants to hold on to it. Not because she is irreplaceable, not because the connection was perfect, but because your brain now knows what it feels like to be fully seen, fully accepted, and fully alive. That is why it seems impossible to forget her. Because letting go isn't about losing her, it's about learning to give yourself the same recognition, the same validation, and the same sense of purpose that she reflected back to you. Until you do that, your thoughts keep returning to her. They are reminders of a deeper truth. She awakened a part of you that your logical mind cannot ignore. And the more you understand this, the less frustrating it becomes. Because now, instead of asking, "Why can't I stop thinking about her?" you start asking, "What part of me feels incomplete without her?" Once you answer that question and start fulfilling that part of yourself independently, her presence begins to fade naturally. Not forcibly, not painfully, but gently, like a teacher stepping back after showing you the lesson.